The thunder didn't just rumble. It tore through the night like something angry and alive, and the Atlanta rain followed, hard and merciless, slapping the window panes and the stone porch in icy sheets. I sat on the front steps with my arms wrapped around Milo. He was 5 years old, warm and heavy in my lap, his little body limp with exhaustion. Tear tracks still streaked his cheeks, and every few seconds his eyelashes fluttered like he was still trying to outrun the shouting in his sleep. Then the iron gate slammed. Not a polite click, a full, final crash that echoed down the driveway and through my bones. It was the kind of sound that didn't just shut a gate, it shut a life. Behind it, the 3-story Hartwell house glowed with steady, golden light. Inside was warmth, dryness, safety. None of it for me. Cordelia Hartwell filled the doorway like a judge who'd already decided the sentence. Even in the storm, her hair looked perfect. Her expression looked disgusted, like the rain was my fault. "Get out, Briar," she snapped. "Get out of this house immediately. I don't want to see your face again." I tightened my arms around Milo. He didn't wake, but his shoulders twitched, and his mouth made a tiny sound, the kind kids make when they're afraid even in dreams. Cordelia's gaze flicked down to him, and her lips curled. "And take that child with you," she said, loud enough to make sure the whole street could hear. "Two burdens, you're worthless, a parasite." "Cordelia," my throat felt scraped raw. "It was an accident, he's 5. "It was not an accident," she cut in. "He broke my vase." As if that porcelain was a person. A second later, my old suitcase came flying out into the yard. It hit the wet grass, popped open, and my clothes spilled out like the house itself was throwing me up. Milo's dinosaur pajamas, a sweater I'd owned since college, the only decent pair of shoes I had. The rain soaked everything instantly, turning fabric heavy, colors bleeding, my life plastering itself to the ground. Behind Cordelia, Graham Hartwell stood in the hallway with his shoulders hunched, hands at his sides. He didn't say a word, not one. He didn't even look at me directly. He just turned his face away like silence could keep his hands clean. That quiet hit harder than her screaming. "Please," I said, hatting how small my voice sounded. "Where am I supposed to go in the middle of a storm?" Cordelia's laugh was quick and ugly. "Not my problem. You should have thought about that before you raised your child to be careless." My child, like Milo wasn't her grandson, like he was Nolan's son. Nolan. His name rose in my chest like a bruise being pressed, and for a second the porch disappeared. I saw Nolan standing between me and his mother the way he always used to, calm but firm. "Mama," he'd say, "don't be too hard on her, Briar's still young." He loved them too, loyal in a way this family never deserved. Every dollar he made, he handed to Cordelia for the family, trusting her to manage it. He kept just enough to buy Milo a little toy now and then, or to take me out for a snack like it was a secret rebellion. 3 years ago, on a bright morning that feels like it belonged to someone else, he packed a carry-on and kissed my forehead. Then he kissed Milo, right between his eyebrows where Milo always giggled. "Daddy, only going to be gone for a few days," he promised. "Be good, you two." Chicago, last-minute work trip. He never came back. An incident, a flight over Lake Michigan, then nothing, no wreckage, no confirmed bodies, just a disappearance so clean it felt unreal, like the sky had swallowed him and refused to spit him out. I mourned an accident. Cordelia turned it into a weapon. "You're a jinx," she said within weeks. "My son would be alive if he never married you." From that moment on, I stopped being family and became a bill she couldn't wait to stop paying. So I worked. I scrubbed this house until it shined. I cooked 3 meals a day. Then I went to my shift at a nearby fulfillment center, standing on concrete for hours until my feet went numb. Every paycheck I handed over, all of it. I never kept even $20. Cordelia took it like she was collecting rent from a tenant she hated. If my food wasn't seasoned enough, she called me stupid. If Milo laughed too loudly, she called him unruly. If I wore the same coat too many times, she sneered that I looked cheap. I swallowed it all because I believed something soft and foolish, that if I endured, If I proved my devotion, they'd eventually see me the way Nolan did. Tonight proved how wrong I was. Milo had been playing in the living room with one of his little cars. He took a turn too fast around the coffee table, bumped it, and Cordelia's beloved porcelain vase toppled and shattered. One sharp crack. Milo froze. "Mommy," he whispered, already shaking. Cordelia exploded. She screamed at him until his face crumpled and he sobbed into my shirt. Then she turned on me like my breathing had pushed the vase over. "That's it," she hissed. "I'm done, get out, both of you." The vase wasn't the cause. It was the match. Cordelia stepped forward and jabbed a finger at the gate. "Leave, and don't come back. If you step foot on this property again, I'll call the police." Graham stood there, still silent, still avoiding my eyes. I picked up Milo carefully, his head lolling against my shoulder, his small hand curling into the fabric of my soaked shirt. He murmured in his sleep, a broken little sound, and my heart tightened so hard it hurt to breathe. I dragged the suitcase through the mud, shoving wet clothes back inside with numb fingers. The zipper stuck. My hands shook. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Milo needed me solid. When I got it closed, Cordelia watched with the satisfaction of someone who'd finally thrown out trash. I walked through the gate without looking back. The storm swallowed me the moment I stepped onto the sidewalk. Wind shoved rain into my eyes. My shoes slipped on wet pavement. The suitcase wheels clicked and scraped like a broken toy. My first thought was Mississippi. Home. My parents' little place in a rural town where the nights were quiet and the roads turned to dirt. They'd take me in. Of course they would. And that's why I couldn't go. They were old and frail and already struggling. I couldn't show up with a child and a suitcase and my whole ruined life and ask them to carry me too. So I walked. Past shuttered storefronts, past puddles that reflected neon like bruises, past cars that hissed by without slowing. Downtown, the lights of the Atlanta bus terminal appeared through the rain, yellow and sickly, buzzing above the entrance like a warning. Inside, it was loud in a way that felt hollow. Announcements crackled. Engines groaned. People sat slumped on plastic benches, staring at nothing, carrying their lives in bags just like mine. The air inside smelled like wet coats and diesel and old coffee that had been burned one too many times. Somewhere a baby cried, thin and desperate, and a couple argued in low voices. A security guard walked past once, his boots squeaking, and his eyes slid over me and then away, like he was trained to keep moving. I kept my head down anyway. Shame still found me. I was soaked. My suitcase leaned against my knee like an accusation. I could almost hear Cordelia's voice in every crackle of the speaker system, calling me a freeloader, a nobody, like my effort and my grief were invisible. Milo shifted again, and his mouth tightened like he was still hearing her. He whispered something I couldn't catch, then flinched in his sleep. I pulled him closer, shielding his face with my palm, like I could block the memories the way I blocked the wind. A bus pulled in and its brakes screamed. Hot air blasted from the opening doors, smelling faintly of rubber and metal, and for a second I wanted to run onto it without even knowing the destination. Anywhere but here. Anywhere but back to that gate. But I had no ticket, no cash, no plan, just a child and a storm and a body that refused to give up. I found a corner under an awning where the wind didn't hit as hard. I slid down against the concrete wall, pulled Milo into my lap, and wrapped my thin rain jacket around him like it could be a blanket. He stirred, blinking up at me through lashes still wet. His eyes were glassy with sleep and fear. "Mommy," he whispered. "I'm here," I said, forcing my voice steady. He shivered, tucked his face into my neck, and said the words that cracked me open. "Mommy, I'm cold." I pressed my lips into his hair. "I know, baby, I know." I curled my body around him, rubbing his back in small circles, trying to transfer warmth I didn't have. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I wanted to fall apart. But Milo was in my arms, and he was still here. He needed me to be the one thing in his life that didn't disappear. So I swallowed the cry, and made myself a promise so quiet it almost didn't count. I will not let this be the end of us. Outside, rain hammered the pavement. Inside, Milo's breathing slowed again as he drifted back towards sleep. That's when a bright beam of light sliced through the downpour, sweeping across the terminal entrance and landing directly on the corner where we sat. The beam of light didn't flicker like the terminal's cheap neon. It was sharp, deliberate. It cut straight through the rain like a searchlight, pinning me in my corner under the awning. For a second, I thought it was security, or police, or someone from the Hartwell house, finally deciding to finish the job and drag me away like I was a crime scene they wanted cleaned up. I raised my arm to shield Milo's face. He was half awake again, his body stiffening against mine, sensing my fear before he fully understood it. The engine sound was the next thing that didn't belong. Not a bus, not an old sedan rattling down the street. This was smooth, quiet, expensive, the kind of sound you only notice because it doesn't fight the world, it glides through it. A black SUV rolled into view and stopped so close to the curb that splashes of rainwater leapt up against its tires. The headlights stayed on, bright enough to make the raindrops look like silver needles. It was a luxury model, the kind you see outside upscale restaurants and gated neighborhoods, the kind that shouldn't be anywhere near a place where people slept in corners and held their children like life rafts. The driver's window lowered slowly, and my stomach dropped. Tatum Hartwell, Nolan's sister. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, not since the day they held that symbolic funeral. The day they stood around an empty casket with polished grief and dry eyes, pretending they lost a man they'd already started dividing up like property. Back then, Tatum was loud in the wrong ways. Her hair dyed too bright, her clothes too sharp, her eyes too restless. She looked like a storm in human form. She never called me her sister-in-law. She barely spoke to me at all unless it was a sideways comment that hit like a slap. After that funeral, she vanished too. Cordelia used to spit her name like it tasted bitter. Ungrateful girl, she'd say. A disgrace. Then nothing. I figured she'd gone exactly where people go when they decide their family isn't worth the air they breathe. But the woman behind the wheel tonight was not that girl. Her hair was still dyed, but a controlled chestnut instead of reckless color. Her lips were painted a dark, calm red that didn't scream for attention. It owned it. Big sunglasses sat on her face even though it was night, and somehow it didn't look ridiculous. It looked intentional, like armor. She didn't smile. She didn't look surprised to see me. She looked prepared. She lifted her sunglasses with 2 fingers, revealing eyes that had sharpened into something colder than I remembered. Not cruel, just guarded, like she'd learned to keep emotion locked up for survival. "Get in," she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a suggestion. It was a command so flat it almost sounded bored. I didn't move. My fingers tightened around Milo's jacket. "Tatum," I managed, my voice thin. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer. Her gaze flicked to Milo, then back to me. "I said get in," she repeated, impatient now. "Do you want your son to freeze out here?" The words hit my chest like a shove. Milo shivered, his small teeth clicking once. He pressed his face against my shoulder and murmured, "Mommy." My arms instinctively pulled him closer. I hated that she was right. I hated that my pride, my fear, my instincts screaming trap didn't matter as much as Milo's body trembling in the cold. I stared at her. "How did you even know we were here?" Something flashed across her face. Not guilt, not anger, just exhaustion. Like she'd been awake for a long time, not just tonight, but years. "You don't have to be afraid," she said, and her voice softened by a fraction, enough that it almost felt human. "I'm not my mother." That alone made me flinch, like she'd read my worst thought out loud. Then she leaned slightly toward the open window, looked straight into my eyes, and said something that stopped my breath. "I have a secret I need to show you," she said quietly. "A secret about Nolan." Nolan. His name was still a live wire inside me. Even after 3 years of grief, even after being shoved out of the house that carried his last name, The sound of it still made my heart react like he might walk around the corner any second. I didn't trust her, not fully, not even close. But I didn't have the luxury of trust anymore. I had a child, a storm, a night that didn't care if I believed in people or not. Tatum's eyes didn't flick away. She held my stare like she was daring me to call her bluff. Milo shivered again, softer this time, like his strength was draining. His cheek felt too cool against my skin. That decided it. I swallowed hard, lifted Milo into my arms, and dragged the suitcase toward the SUV with fingers that barely worked. The rain hit my face like tiny slaps as I moved, and every step felt like I was walking into a room where someone had turned off the lights and told me to find the exit. Tatum hit a button, and the back door unlocked with a soft click. The interior was warm, leather seats, clean, dry. The smell inside wasn't mildew and bus exhaust, it was faint cologne and something expensive and quiet. I set Milo down gently in the back. He immediately curled into the seat like it was a bed, his eyes fluttering shut. The heater blew warm air over his face, and I watched his shoulders loosen, as if his body had been holding its breath all night. I climbed in beside him and pulled the door shut. The sound was solid, sealing, like the outside world was suddenly behind glass. Tatum pulled away from the curb, without another word. The bus terminal faded into rain and neon. Atlanta became a blur of streetlights smeared into gold lines across the windshield. Water raced down the glass. The wipers moved like metronomes, marking time I couldn't control. Inside the SUV, everything was too quiet. The kind of silence that forces you to hear your own thoughts. I watched Tatum in the side profile. Her hands on the wheel were steady. Her posture was straight. She drove like someone who knew where she was going and didn't expect obstacles. I kept waiting for her to speak, to explain, to say anything that made sense. But she didn't. And I didn't ask again, because I was afraid the answer would snap the fragile thread holding me together. Where did she get this car? I wondered. Where did she get the confidence, the money, the calm? When we passed a lit-up diner, I caught my reflection in the window for a second. Wet hair stuck to my face. My eyes looked hollow. My coat looked like it had been dragged through a river. I looked like someone running from a life. Tatum looked like someone running toward a plan. Finally, the SUV turned into a wealthy district where the streets were cleaner and the buildings climbed higher. We pulled up in front of a modern high-rise with a doorman under a canopy. The lobby was glass and marble and warm light. I almost laughed because it felt ridiculous, like I'd stepped into the wrong movie. Tatum parked, got out, and opened my door without waiting for me to figure out what to do. Her expression stayed guarded, but her eyes flicked to Milo with something close to concern. I lifted him carefully, my arms aching from the day and the night and everything else. He didn't wake. His face relaxed against my shoulder, finally safe enough to surrender. Tatum took the suitcase without asking. It surprised me. The old Tatum would have let it sit in the rain just to prove a point. We rode an elevator up so high my ears popped. The apartment on the 20-something floor was immaculate, spacious, quiet, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine, a view of Atlanta that made the city look almost gentle, like the rain hadn't been trying to drown it. Tatum led me straight to a bedroom and pulled back the comforter. Clean sheets, pillows like clouds. I laid Milo down and watched him sink into the mattress, his little body finally unclenching. He sighed in his sleep, a deep sound that made my chest tighten again. Tatum set the suitcase by the wall. She didn't touch anything else. "You and your son can stay here tonight," she said, as if she was reading a statement. "You're safe." I stared at her. My voice came out rough. "Why are you doing this?" For the first time, her mask shifted, just slightly, like a crack in ice. "Because," she began, then stopped, like the next sentence cost too much. She looked toward the bedroom where Milo slept. Then back to me. "Tomorrow morning," she said, calmer again. "Once you've had a little time to breathe, I'll show you the real reason Nolan couldn't come back." My throat tightened. "Is he?" I couldn't finish the question. Tatum held my gaze. Her eyes didn't soften, but they didn't lie either. "Tomorrow," she repeated, firm, "and you'll need to stay calm." Then she placed a keycard on the kitchen counter and turned toward the door. "Get some sleep, Briar." Before I could say anything else, she was gone. The apartment fell into a kind of silence I hadn't heard in years. Not the silence of neglect, not the silence of someone refusing to defend you. This was a stillness that felt temporary, like the air itself was waiting. I sat on the edge of the couch and stared out at the city through the giant windows. Rain continued to slide down the glass, but the storm was fading. Somewhere far below, headlights moved like tiny insects along the roads. The skyline glimmered, steady and indifferent. I should have slept. Milo needed me rested. My body begged for it. But my mind wouldn't let go. Nolan's name kept echoing in my chest, matching the rhythm of my pulse. A secret about him, a real reason. For 3 years, I'd lived with grief shaped like a question mark. Tonight, someone had walked in and told me there might be an answer. Hours passed in fragments. I drifted, woke, drifted again, always listening for the click of a lock, always afraid the door would open and Cordelia would be standing there, smiling. It didn't happen. Instead, the sky began to lighten. A thin, gray dawn stretched over Atlanta, turning the clouds into bruised cotton. The first hint of sunrise painted the edges of the buildings with pale gold. I stood by the window, arms wrapped around myself, and watched the city wake up like nothing had happened. My dread and hope twisted together until I couldn't tell which one was stronger. Behind me, Milo slept peacefully for the first time all night. His lips were parted slightly, his face soft and pink again. Then, from the hallway, I heard the faint click of the lock. I didn't turn at first, I just held my breath. Tatum stepped inside carrying a paper bag that smelled like warm bread and coffee. She looked the same as last night, composed and controlled, but her eyes were heavy, like she hadn't slept either. She set the bag down on the table and poured a glass of water without asking if I wanted it. "Eat something," she said quietly. "You haven't eaten." "I don't want food," I replied, my voice thin with impatience and fear. "Tell me." Tatum met my gaze. This time her expression didn't feel like armor. It felt like a warning. "Before I show you," she said, "you need to promise me something." My hands clenched at my sides. "What?" Her voice dropped, steady and serious. "No matter what you hear," she said, "no matter how ugly it is, you stay calm. For Milo, and for Nolan." And just like that, the sunrise didn't feel warm anymore. It felt like the light before a storm breaks again. Tatum didn't sit down like someone offering comfort. She sat like someone about to deliver a verdict. The apartment still smelled like coffee and warm bread, but the warmth didn't reach me. Milo was asleep in the bedroom, bundled under the comforter like he belonged there, his little chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. Every so often he made a tiny sound, a soft hum like he was trying to reassure himself in his dreams that the world hadn't ended overnight. I kept looking toward the hallway. Like the moment I blinked too long, Cordelia would appear and yank him out of bed. Tatum followed my gaze. "Before we do this," she said quietly, "you need to hear me." My arms were crossed so tightly I could feel my nails through my sleeves. "I'm listening." "No matter what you hear," she repeated, steady and low, "you stay calm. Milo can't see you fall apart. Nolan wouldn't want that either." The way she said Nolan's name made my throat tighten. It wasn't sentimental. It wasn't dramatic. It was heavy, like she'd carried it alone for a long time and was tired of pretending it didn't crush her. I nodded once, even though my body didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. My heart was beating too fast for morning. Tatum reached into her bag and pulled out a small recorder. Not a phone, not a cheap little app. A real device, black and plain, with a tiny light that blinked like an eye. Then she pulled out a thin folder. The folder looked ordinary. Manila, slightly bent at one corner. The kind of thing people use to carry paperwork they don't want anyone else to see. She placed both on the table between us, like she was laying down weapons. What is that? I asked. Tatum's jaw tightened. Proof, or at least the beginning of it. Her finger hovered over the recorder. For a second, she didn't press anything. She just stared at the device like it could bite. Then she looked up at me. Promise me again. I didn't want to promise. Promises felt like traps, like things people demanded right before they destroyed you. But Milo was asleep in the next room, and I couldn't let him wake up to my screaming. Fine, I said, my voice sounded rough. I promise. Tatum pressed play. At first it was static, a soft hiss, like rain on a distant roof. Then voices emerged, muffled but unmistakable. My stomach dropped before my brain even caught up, because I knew those voices the way you know the sound of a door slamming in your own home. Graham's voice came first, low, controlled, annoyed. You're too obvious, he said. You're always on her. Don't you think she'll start to suspect something? Cordelia's laugh was sharp, bright, and mean. Even through the recorder, it cut clean. And if she suspects, what can she do? Cordelia snapped. That little country girl can barely keep her head up. It's a blessing I even let her live under this roof. My mouth went dry. Tatum didn't look at me. She stared at the table like if she met my eyes, she'd shatter. The recording continued. Cordelia again, venomous and casual like she was discussing garbage pickup schedules. My son is gone. She's useless now. Don't you see it? She and that child are just two hungry mouths. Graham sighed, irritated. But the boy is our grandson. Cordelia's voice sharpened, and something in it made my skin crawl. Grandson, she repeated, as if the word offended her. Wake up. Nolan is gone. The line of this house is finished, and I'll find a way to get rid of both of them when the time is right. My vision blurred so fast I thought I might faint. I didn't realize my hands had curled until I felt pain. My nails were digging into my palms, and when I loosened my grip slightly, I saw faint crescent marks in my skin. The recording kept going. This house belongs to us, Cordelia said, and Nolan's inheritance belongs to us too. I won't give that woman a single dollar. The words hit me like a punch. Inheritance. I'd spent 3 years believing I was doing the noble thing, the loyal thing, the right thing. Working before dawn, cooking, cleaning, running Milo's baths, standing on hard concrete floors at a fulfillment center until my knees ached and my back felt like it might split. Bringing home my paycheck and handing it over without even checking my own account balance because I wanted to prove I wasn't a burden. Because I wanted Nolan's parents to see me as family. All I'd been doing was feeding the people who were quietly sharpening knives behind my back. The recording ended in a click so small it felt insulting. For a moment, the apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and Milo's breathing in the other room. I stared at the recorder like it was still speaking. My stomach rolled, hot nausea rising. No, I whispered. My voice didn't feel real. No, that can't be. It is, Tatum said. Her voice was tight. That's them. My chest tightened until I could barely inhale. I pressed 2 fingers to my wrist like I could slow my pulse by force. They talked about me like I was. I couldn't finish the sentence. Like I was a pest, a stain, a thing. And Milo, like he was nothing but a mouth. Tatum's hand curled into a fist. That's why I told you to stay calm, because once you hear it, you can't unhear it. I swallowed hard, forcing air into my lungs. Why are you showing me this now? Tatum's eyes finally met mine. There was something raw there, not softness, but pain that had been sealed up for years. Because last night changed everything, she said. Cordelia throwing you out in a storm wasn't just cruelty, it was timing, like she finally decided it was safe. Safe for what? I demanded, and my voice broke on the last word. Tatum didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the folder and slid the first paper toward me. It was a bank statement. The printed lines were clean and ordinary. The kind of normal document people glance at without thinking. Except one number on the page looked wrong. Too big, too violent. My eyes snagged on it and refused to let go. A withdrawal, just days before Nolan disappeared. $200,000. I stared at it like it might rearrange itself into something less horrifying if I looked hard enough. I breathed. That's his savings. I know, Totem's voice was flat. My hands shook as I pulled the paper closer, scanning the details like I was searching for a typo that could save me. Date, amount, account. Then I saw the signature on the withdrawal authorization. My throat tightened until it hurt. Graham Hartwell. I knew his handwriting. I'd seen it on holiday cards, on documents Cordelia made me file away, on the rare occasions he signed anything instead of letting his wife do it. It was his. I pushed the paper away like it burned. Why would he? I started, but my mind was already racing ahead, trying to build a bridge between facts that felt impossible to connect. Totem slid the next document forward. Transfer record. The money didn't sit in Nolan's account. It didn't disappear into a mysterious bank error. It moved, cleanly, immediately. Recipient, Cordelia Hartwell. I felt the room tilt. Cordelia had taken Nolan's savings. Not borrowed, not managed, taken. I heard my own heartbeat thudding in my ears, loud as the storm last night. Totem handed me the next page, and I almost didn't want to look. Like my eyes were about to see something that would permanently change how I understood the world. It was a brokerage statement. Cordelia's name again. Investment activity, dates, numbers. I didn't understand everything, but I didn't need to. The truth was simple and brutal even without the fancy terms. She moved the entire amount into stocks. And then the value dropped. And dropped. And dropped. The statement showed the account draining like blood. Within days, nearly everything was gone. I stared at the final balance, and something inside me went cold in a way grief had never managed. Because grief was losing someone to fate. This was losing someone to greed. My hands shook harder. I pressed my fingers to my mouth to stop it from trembling. So they lost it, I whispered. They lost Nolan's money. Yes. Totem's voice turned bitter, and I don't think Nolan let it go quietly. The words hung there, sharp and obvious. Nolan wasn't stupid. He watched every detail of his life. He planned. He protected. He triple-checked. If he discovered his parents had taken his entire savings and gambled it away like it was nothing. I could almost see him standing in that house, jaw tight, eyes full of hurt, trying to keep his voice calm while something inside him snapped. I'd seen Nolan angry maybe twice in our whole marriage. He wasn't a man who exploded. He was a man who endured until he couldn't. My stomach twisted again. You think that's why he... Totem's eyes hardened. I think Nolan's disappearance wasn't an accident. The sentence didn't feel like a theory. It felt like a knife being pushed into a wound I'd spent 3 years trying to bandage. I sat back, breathing shallow, my mind flipping through memories like a film reel that suddenly made sense in a new, horrifying way. Cordelia's coldness after the plane incident, the way she moved through grief like it was paperwork, the way she looked at me like I was now excess baggage. The way Graham never asked how I was doing, never checked on Milo, never touched the subject of Nolan unless Cordelia demanded it. And last night, the vase. It wasn't about porcelain. It was about opportunity. They'd been waiting for the moment they could throw me out without looking like villains. I felt anger rising, but it wasn't hot and messy the way it used to be. It was clean, focused, dangerous. I thought of Milo asleep in the next room, and something in me hardened into steel. I gave them everything, I said, and my voice shook, but not from weakness, from disbelief at my own past. Every paycheck, every hour, every ounce of pride. Totem watched me carefully, like she was waiting to see what kind of person would stand up from this. My fingers curled again, but this time I didn't dig my nails in. I planted my palms flat on the table to steady myself. They didn't just throw me out, I said slowly. They used me. Totem nodded once. Yes. My throat tightened. And Nalin. My voice cracked. I swallowed and forced it back into place. I thought I lost him to a plane, I said. I thought the world took him. Totem's expression didn't soften, but it flickered with something like regret. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm sorry you had to live in that lie. My eyes burned, but I refused to cry like I had last night. Tears felt too easy, too generous. Instead, I sat there, shaking with fury that had nowhere to go yet. Totem leaned forward slightly. I've suspected this for a long time, she said. I didn't have proof until I got the proof. I planted that recorder in Graham's study nearly a year ago. My mouth opened, then closed again. A year. While I was scrubbing their floors and handing over my paycheck, she'd been gathering evidence like a woman preparing for war. And you waited until now to show me? I asked, my voice rough. Totem's gaze dropped. Because I didn't know if I could trust you to survive it, and because I wasn't ready to drag you into something that could get you hurt. That line stung, but it didn't feel like an insult. It felt like fear. Totem, I said, and my voice came out steadier now. I'm already hurt. She looked up, and for the first time I saw something in her that wasn't control. It was grief. The same grief that had been rotting under my ribs for 3 years. I don't have direct proof they killed him, she said. Not yet, but Nalin was careful, too careful. I don't believe he would just vanish without leaving something behind. Her words hit a dormant place in my mind, like a key turning. A memory surfaced, sudden and sharp. Nalin, standing in our bedroom a week before that trip, holding a small wooden box in his hands. Not fancy, just finely carved, smooth edges, the kind of thing you'd keep because it meant something. He'd handed it to me like it was fragile. This is for us, he'd said, a memory box. I'd laughed at the time, scolding him for being dramatic. But his face hadn't matched my joke. His eyes had been too serious, too heavy. If I can't return one day, he'd said quietly, open it. Everything you need to know is inside. My breath caught. I hadn't thought about that box in years. I'd buried it under old things, under denial, under the desperate belief that his disappearance was simple tragedy. I stared at Totem like the room had changed shape around us. Totem, I whispered, my pulse roaring in my ears. Nalin left something. She leaned forward, eyes sharpening. What? I swallowed, feeling the truth rise up like a wave. A carved wooden box, I said. He gave it to me before he disappeared, and he told me, my voice went thin. He told me if I can't return, open it. For a few seconds after I said it, the apartment felt too quiet. A carved wooden box, Totem repeated, like she was testing the words for weight. Where is it? In the house, I said. My mouth tasted like metal. In our old bedroom, I hid it deep in the closet under an old suitcase. Saying it out loud should have made me feel relieved. Like finally, there was something solid, something real, something Nalin had left behind for me. Instead, it made my stomach drop. Because the house wasn't mine anymore, not even a little. Cordelia had made that clear with the gate, the shouting, the suitcase thrown into the rain like she was tossing out trash. And even if I did go back, what were the odds she hadn't found it by now? Cordelia didn't just clean. She hunted. She had a way of going through my things like she was searching for proof that I didn't belong. Totem exhaled slowly, rubbing her thumb along the edge of the folder like she needed something to hold onto. We have to get it, she said. Her voice was calm, but the words carried urgency. If Nalin hid anything, it's in that box. And if Cordelia found it, I asked. Totem's eyes flicked up. Then we're already too late. The bluntness made me flinch, but it also snapped something into focus. There was no room left for pretending. Nalin's disappearance wasn't some tragic mystery we whispered about at holidays. It was a crime, a betrayal, and somewhere in that house, the clue to everything was either waiting or already destroyed. Totem stood and started packing, the way a person paces when their mind is working faster than their body can keep up. She locks everything, Totem muttered. And after last night, she's going to be watching the house like a hawk. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now, which felt strange, like my fear had finally burned out and left something harder behind. "What did you mean?" I asked quietly, "when you said you planted a recorder a year ago?" Tatum stopped packing. Her shoulders rose and fell once, like she was bracing herself. "You're not going to like this," she said. "I haven't liked anything in a while," I replied. That earned me the smallest flicker of something on her face. Not a smile, more like recognition. She sat back down across from me, elbows on her knees, eyes fixed somewhere past the window. "I didn't run away from home because I was wild," she said, voice low. "I ran away because I couldn't breathe in that house anymore." I waited. I didn't interrupt. Something told me if I spoke, she'd shut the door on this part of herself again. Tatum's fingers twisted together, knuckles whitening. "Cordelia always wanted a second son," she said. "She got me instead." I swallowed. The pieces clicked into place with sickening ease. The way Cordelia's love had always felt conditional. The way she used people like tools. Nolan had been her golden proof that she was a successful mother. I'd seen it, even when I was trying not to. Tatum's voice tightened. When I was little, she'd call me a mistake. She'd compare me to Nolan constantly. "He's disciplined, he's smart, he's worth something." And then she'd look at me like I was embarrassing. Her jaw flexed hard. Sometimes she hit me, not every day, not the way people imagine in movies. It was worse because it was unpredictable. It made me live on edge. My chest tightened. I remembered the way Tatum used to lash out at everyone, including me. How she used to dress like she was trying to armor herself in attention. I'd judged her for it. I'd rolled my eyes. I'd called her immature in my head. I hadn't understood she was surviving. "The only person who stopped her," Tatum said, voice cracking slightly, "was Nolan." She blinked hard and looked away, as if she hated the weakness showing on her face. "He used to stand between us," she continued. "If she raised a hand, he'd catch her wrist. If she started in on me, he'd redirect it. He'd take it." My throat burned. "He never told me." "Because he didn't want you to hate them," Tatum said bitterly. "He wanted everything to stay manageable. He thought if he kept the peace, we'd all be okay." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. He was wrong. The silence between us felt thick. Then, for the first time since she'd walked into my corner at the bus terminal, Tatum's face crumpled. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just a sudden break, like a dam that had been holding back too much pressure for too long. Tears slid down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them at first, like she didn't even realize they were there. "Nolan was the only one who loved me in that house," she whispered. "The only one who made me feel like I wasn't defective." The sound of her voice did something to me I didn't expect. It softened the place inside my chest that had been clenched for years. I reached across the table without thinking and laid my hand lightly on her wrist, not to fix anything, just to let her know she wasn't alone in the room anymore. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I didn't know." Tatum's eyes snapped to mine. Her lashes were wet. Her expression was raw and furious at the same time. "After he disappeared," she said, "I didn't believe it. I couldn't. Nolan didn't do random mistakes. He didn't just vanish." She wiped her cheeks fast, like she was angry at herself for crying. "I started watching them," she continued. "Cordelia and Graham, their grief didn't look like grief. It looked like relief, fear, like they were waiting for something to blow back on them." My skin prickled. "So I left," she said. "I ran and I did whatever I had to do. I waited tables. I worked retail. I cleaned offices at night. I saved everything, every dollar." Her eyes hardened again, controls snapping back into place. "And I used it to hire a private investigator." That landed like a punch. "You hired." "I had to," she cut in. "I didn't have anyone else. I couldn't go to the police with a feeling. I needed facts." I stared at her. This wasn't the reckless girl I remembered. This was a woman who'd been building something quietly in the dark. "The car," I said slowly. "The apartment." "Not mine," she admitted. "A friend, someone Nolan trusted, someone who owed him. I've been borrowing favors." Her gaze sharpened. And now I'm done borrowing, now I'm collecting. The words sent a chill through me, but also a strange comfort. I wasn't the only one who'd loved Nolan enough to fight for him. I inhaled slowly. Okay, so we need the box. Yes, Totem said, and we need a way to get you back in the house without looking like a break-in. I almost laughed. The idea sounded absurd on paper. But then I pictured Cordelia's face last night. The way she'd smiled like she was above the law, above consequences, above humanity. And my laugh died. How do we do that? Totem asked, voice tight. You can't just walk up and ask politely. She'll slam the gate in your face. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling like an answer might be written there. And then slowly, something formed in my mind. Not hope, not kindness. A strategy. I go back, I said. Totem's head snapped up. No. I go back, I repeated, firmer, but not the way you're thinking. Her eyes narrowed. Briar. She thinks I'm weak, I said, and I felt something inside me settle. Cordelia, she thinks I'm desperate. She thinks I can't survive without her house and her approval. Totem opened her mouth, but I kept going, because the plan was already locking into place like a puzzle piece clicking home. That's what I use, I said. I don't go back angry, I don't go back defiant, I go back broken. Totem stared at me. You want to beg? Yes, I said, and even I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I'll cry, I'll plead, I'll act like the storm scared me into realizing I need her. I'll tell her I was wrong. I'll tell her I can't raise Milo alone. The words tasted bitter, like swallowing poison on purpose. But I kept speaking anyway. Cordelia doesn't want me gone because she hates me, I continued. She wants me gone because she thinks I'm a problem she can't control. If I show up crawling, promising obedience, she'll love it. She'll take me back just to have something to crush again. Totem's expression shifted, worry and admiration fighting each other. That's dangerous, she said quietly. What if she doesn't believe you? She will, I said, because believing it makes her feel powerful, and she lives for that. I pictured Cordelia's triumphant smile, the way her eyes lit up when she thought she'd won. She'll take me back, I said, not because she's merciful, because she's arrogant. Totem's hands tightened around the edge of the table. And Milo? He stays here, I said immediately. With you, he cannot be in that house again, not for 1 minute. The thought of Milo hearing Cordelia's voice again made my stomach twist. Totem hesitated, then nodded once. If you do this, you keep your phone on you. Always, you record everything. I will, I promised. She leaned forward, eyes intense. And if anything feels wrong, you leave. You don't play hero. You don't try to outsmart them. You leave. I met her gaze. I'm not doing this to be brave. I'm doing it because Nolan left us something, and I'm done letting Cordelia Hartwell decide what happens to my life. The words came out harder than I intended. And for the first time, I realized it was true. Somewhere between the porch steps and the bus terminal, something in me had changed. The part of me that used to apologize for existing was gone. In its place was something quieter. A woman who could endure. A woman who could act. A woman who could lie convincingly to a monster if it meant saving her child and finding the truth. That afternoon, I dressed in the oldest, plainest clothes I owned. I didn't brush my hair properly. I smudged a little makeup under my eyes to look exhausted. I made myself look like exactly what Cordelia wanted to believe I was. Pathetic. Dependent. Defeated. Milo slept while I watched him for a long moment, memorizing the softness of his face. Then I bent down and kissed his forehead. Mommy's coming back, I whispered. I promise. Totem drove me part of the way, then let me take a taxi the last stretch so nothing traced back to her. The familiar street appeared like a nightmare I'd once lived in and couldn't fully escape. When the taxi pulled away, the rain had finally stopped, but the pavement was still wet and dark, reflecting the streetlights like a warning. The iron gate stood there, tall and cold. For a second I froze. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might give me away. I took a deep breath. Not to calm down. To prepare. I lifted my hand and knocked. A pause. Then Cordelia's voice rang out through the intercom, sharp and irritated. "Who is it?" I didn't answer. I knocked again. The gate clicked. It opened slowly, like the mouth of something hungry. Cordelia stepped out under the covered entryway, arms crossed, expression already twisted into annoyance. Then she saw me, and her brow furrowed in disbelief. "You," she snapped. "What are you doing here?" My throat tightened. My body shook, not because I was afraid, but because acting required precision, and my rage was a living thing under my skin. I lowered my gaze. And before she could say another word, I dropped to my knees on the wet cement right in front of her. The cold soaked through my jeans instantly. I bowed my head. And I let out the first sob I'd practiced in the mirror all morning. "Mama," I cried, voice breaking perfectly. "I'm sorry, please forgive me." The gates of hell had opened, and I had just stepped back inside on purpose. Cordelia didn't rush to pull me up. She let me stay on my knees in that cold, wet place like it was the natural position for someone like me. For a long moment, she just stared down at me, tasting the power of it. I could feel her satisfaction like a heat source, even through the damp chill that was soaking into my jeans. "Well," she finally said, drawing the word out, "look who crawled back." I kept my head bowed. I let my shoulders shake. I gave her the kind of sob that sounded ashamed, not furious. I made my voice small. "I didn't know where else to go," I whispered. "Please, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I'll do better, I'll do anything." Cordelia's mouth lifted, not into a smile but into something sharper, a triumphant curve. "Anything," she echoed. "Yes," I said, and my throat burned on the lie. "Anything." She clicked her tongue and stepped back, as if granting mercy required a performance. "Get up," she said. "You're making a mess on my walkway." I pushed myself to my feet, wobbling just enough to look pathetic. I didn't look her in the eyes. I didn't let my face show what I was thinking. This is not surrender. This is entry. Cordelia turned and walked toward the house without waiting to see if I followed. The front door opened, and warm air brushed my face, carrying that familiar scent of lemon cleaner and expensive candles. For one dizzy second, my body remembered the rhythm of living here, the routines, the rules. Then the memory of last night slammed into me again, and my stomach tightened. Inside, the house looked exactly the same, and somehow that made it worse. The same glossy floors I used to polish until my wrists ached. The same staircase where I used to sit with Milo on my hip, waiting for Nolan to come home. The same framed photos lined neatly along the hallway, smiling faces, frozen in a version of reality that never truly existed. Graham sat in the living room with a newspaper spread wide in front of him, as if time had never moved. He lowered the paper, just enough to look over it. His eyes flicked to me, not surprise, not concern, just that blank, distant acknowledgement people give to things they don't care about. Then he lifted the paper again. No words, no question, no "are you okay?" Not even a hint of embarrassment that I'd been shoved out in a storm with his grandson. His silence crawled under my skin. Cordelia angled her chin toward the kitchen. "You can start by making coffee," she said. "The good kind, not that watery nonsense you used to brew." "Yes, ma'am," I murmured. She paused mid-step, turning her head slightly like a cat, hearing something it didn't like. "Don't call me ma'am," she snapped. "Call me Cordelia, I'm not your boss." Her eyes narrowed, even though technically I am. She swept upstairs, heels clicking, leaving me in the foyer with that familiar, crushing weight settling back onto my shoulders. I moved through the house like an actor hitting marks. Coffee, dishes, counters, floors. Cordelia watched closely at first, hovering, correcting, nitpicking the way she always had. The difference now was that she didn't bother pretending it was about household standards. She wanted to remind me every minute that she could bring me to my knees whenever she wanted. She corrected the angle of a dish towel like it was a moral failure. She inspected the stove after I cleaned it, running a fingertip across spotless metal as if hopping to find a smear. "I don't know why Nolan ever brought you here," she muttered at one point. "He had a habit of collecting strays." My fingers tightened around the sponge. I forced my face into something blank and humbled. "I know," I whispered. "I'm sorry." Cordelia's eyes gleamed. That apology fed her. And every time I gave her what she wanted, I watched her relax by a fraction. I watched the guard in her posture soften. I watched her arrogance bloom. Because arrogance was my opening. At night, she didn't send me upstairs to Nolan's old room. Of course she didn't. "That room is mine now," she declared on the first evening, as if she was announcing a new law of nature. "My downstairs room is too damp. It's bad for my joints." It was a lie so transparent, it might have been funny if it didn't make my blood boil. She wanted Nolan's room because it had been ours, because it had been the one place in this house that felt like it belonged to me, even briefly. She wanted to erase that. She wanted to sit in my space and breathe in my loss. And she wanted the closet. The closet where the box was hidden. When she shut the door to that room, it felt like a lock snapping shut inside my chest. She pointed at a small guest room at the back of the second floor. Bare bed, thin blanket, no photos, no warmth. "You can sleep there," she said, "if you've finished everything." That if carried teeth. For 3 days, I became a shadow again. I rose before dawn. I cleaned until my knuckles dried and cracked. I cooked meals that Cordelia picked apart with surgical precision. I carried laundry baskets up and down the stairs until my legs felt like rubber. And every time I passed Nolan's door, my stomach twisted. Sometimes, late at night, I stood outside it and listened. Not because I expected to hear Nolan's voice. Because I needed to remember what I was fighting for. Cordelia's perfume drifted under the door in thick waves, mixing with the house's clean scent until it felt suffocating. Like she was staining everything she touched. Graham moved through the days like a ghost. He said almost nothing to Cordelia or to me. He ate, read, watched TV, and disappeared to the country club like none of this involved him. His silence was its own kind of cruelty. It told me he'd chosen his side long ago, and he'd chosen it quietly. I kept my phone hidden in my pocket whenever I could. I kept my ears open, my eyes down. I waited. The opportunity came on a Saturday. Cordelia dressed like she was going to war with other women's envy. Hair perfect, jewelry sharp, perfume layered heavy. She stood in the foyer adjusting her earrings while giving me orders like a general. "I'm meeting the girls," she said. "Do not touch my room. Do not go upstairs unless it's to clean the hallway. And don't you dare snoop." "Yes," I said softly. Graham drifted past with golf shoes in hand. "Country club," he said, like it was a complete sentence. And then the front door shut. The house went quiet in a way that made my skin prickle. I stood frozen for several seconds, just listening, waiting for the sound of a car revering, waiting for Cordelia to remember something and come storming back inside. Nothing. I moved quickly, but not wildly. Panic made people sloppy. Sloppy got people caught. I finished a few small tasks first, the way a servant would, in case anyone checked later. Then I climbed the stairs. Nolan's door was closed. Of course it was. My hands were steady as I tried the handle. Locked. For a moment, frustration rose so hot it threatened to burn through my act. My pulse thudded. The box was right there, feet away, and still out of reach. I took a breath, scanning the hallway. The house stayed silent. Then I slipped into the room as soon as I found the door wasn't fully latched the way it had been before, like Cordelia had gotten careless. Or arrogant. Or both. The room looked different. Cordelia's things were everywhere. Her silk robe draped over the chair, her jewelry tray on the dresser, her makeup scattered like she owned not just the space but the air. The scent of her perfume clung to the walls. I hated it. I didn't allow myself to stand there and feel. I moved straight to the closet. The closet door creaked as I opened it, and the sound felt too loud in the silence. My heart hammered. The old suitcase should have been there. Deep in the back, where I'd hidden it like I was hiding a piece of my past. It was. My breath caught. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like free fall. I pushed aside folded sweaters and storage boxes. Nothing. I dropped to my knees, rummaging through the lower shelves with shaking hands, trying to stay quiet while my mind screamed. She found it. She threw it out. It's gone. Nolan's last clue is gone. No. Cordelia didn't throw away things. Cordelia collected them, hoarded them, controlled them. I forced myself to slow down, to think. I looked up, and that's when I saw it. High above the closet shelf line, tucked into a narrow gap near the top, dust-coated and half-hidden, sat the old suitcase like it had been exiled. My throat tightened with relief so sharp it almost hurt. I dragged a chair over, climbed carefully, and pulled it down with both hands. It was heavier than I remembered, and the dust puffed into the air, making me cough silently into my sleeve. I lowered it to the bed and flipped it open. My old clothes were inside, folded the way I'd left them. A cardigan Milo used to sleep in. A scarf Nolan once bought me at a street market. Little scraps of a life I'd thought was gone. My hands shook as I dug to the bottom. Then I found it. The carved wooden box, wrapped in velvet cloth. My breath stalled. For a second, I just held it, feeling the smooth, carved edges under my fingers like it was Nolan's hand reaching across time. Then I opened it. The lid creaked softly, and my world didn't change. There was no hidden letter tucked inside. No key, no flash drive, no neat answer to 3 years of hell. Just one thing. A single wedding photo. Nolan and me, smiling too wide, too young, caught in a moment when we still believed in safety. His arm around my waist. My face turned toward him like he was the center of my universe. My stomach twisted. That was it. I stared at the empty space around the photo, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. No, I whispered, barely audible. No, Nolan, please. The box was supposed to be the reason, the proof, the lifeline. Instead, it was a gut punch. A cruel joke. Or worse. A test. I lifted the photo with trembling fingers, flipping it as if something might be taped behind it, hidden in the cardboard backing. Nothing obvious. Just our faces. Our smiles. A memory that suddenly felt like a trap. My throat tightened until it ached. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them down. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford inside Cordelia's room. I put the photo back in the box with shaking hands, my brain racing through possibilities. Had I missed something? Had Cordelia already taken what mattered? Was Nolan's, everything you need to know, already gone? Time tugged at me like a hand on my shoulder. I glanced toward the window. Light had shifted. The day was moving. Cordelia would come back. I needed to leave. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. And then, through the walls, I heard it. A sound I recognized instantly. An engine rolling up to the gate. The crunch of tires on wet gravel. My blood turned to ice. Cordelia was home. And I was standing in her stolen bedroom, clutching the one thing she would never forgive me for touching. Part 6. The micro-SD and the fake break-in. Escape by ingenuity. The engine didn't stop and idle for long. It cut off, and the sudden silence that followed was worse than the sound. I stood perfectly still, listening. A car door shut outside. A faint clink of keys. Cordelia's heels on stone. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. I had seconds, maybe less. I forced my shaking hands to move. I shoved the box back into the suitcase and shoved the suitcase upward into the closet gap with a strength that felt borrowed from pure panic. Dust rained down. My arms trembled. I dragged the chair back into place. But the door was closed behind me, and Cordelia always noticed everything. If she found her room unlocked, she'd sniff out the lie like a bloodhound. I spun in a tight circle, mind racing, searching for a single idea that wasn't stupid. Then my eyes landed on the wedding photo. The only thing in the box. The only reason Nolan would leave it behind, if the box had once held something else. My throat tightened. He wouldn't just leave a picture. Nolan didn't do meaningless gestures when he was afraid. He did puzzles. My fingers flew to the photo. I flipped it over, and that's when I saw it, barely visible under the light, where the backing met the frame. One corner of the cardboard was slightly lifted, like it hadn't been pressed down all the way. Like it had been opened before. My breath caught. I slid a fingernail under the edge and peeled it back just enough to look inside. And there it was. Not paper, not a note. A tiny dark square, taped flat against the back. A microSD card. For half a heartbeat, my brain didn't understand what I was seeing. Then understanding hit like lightning. This was the box's secret. Hidden behind our smiling faces, the one place no one would think to search. A place Cordelia would see as sentimental junk and overlook. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped it as I peeled the tape and pinched the microSD between two fingers. Footsteps sounded in the foyer. Cordelia's voice floated up, already sharp with irritation, talking to someone outside like she owned the street. I shoved the microSD into the deepest pocket of my jacket. Not my jeans, not an outer pocket Cordelia might pat down if she got suspicious. Deep, close to my skin. Then I shoved the photo back into the box and snapped the lid shut. My mind raced. I couldn't just walk out of the room. Cordelia would see the panic on me. She'd sense I'd been somewhere I shouldn't. I needed a reason for chaos that didn't point to me. A reason Cordelia would believe instantly. A reason that would make her rush to protect what she loved most. Not Nolan's memory. Her valuables. I heard Cordelia climbing the stairs. Her heels struck each step like a countdown. I acted before fear could freeze me. I grabbed the door handle, yanked it, and shoved the door outward hard. The old lock mechanism cracked with a sharp pop, the door jerking as if forced. I stumbled backward and let out a scream that tore out of my throat, raw and believable. "Cordelia," I shrieked, "someone's in here." Her footsteps accelerated. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, rounding the corner. I burst out of the room like I was fleeing danger, hair disheveled, breath ragged, one hand pressed to my chest like I could hold my heart in place. "I heard a noise," I gasped, pointing behind me with shaking fingers. "I came up because I thought the window was open and then I heard someone moving. The door was forced. I think someone broke in." Cordelia's face changed instantly. Not fear for me. Not even fear for the house. Fear for her things. She shoved past me and stormed into the room, scanning wildly. Her eyes went straight to the dresser, to the jewelry tray, to the place she kept her cash stash like a paranoid dragon. She rifled through drawers with frantic hands, knocking bottles and boxes to the floor. Her breath came fast, sharp. "Where is it?" she hissed, half to herself. I stood at the doorway, acting shaken, swallowing my nausea. Please let her focus on the wrong things. Please let her not touch the photo. Cordelia yanked open the bedside drawer and pulled out a small box, flipping it open to check the contents. Her shoulders loosened by half an inch when she saw it was still full. Then she spun on me, eyes narrowed like a knife. "Did you see anyone?" she demanded. "No," I stammered, keeping my voice trembly. "It was too fast. I just heard movement. I think they jumped out the window." Cordelia rushed to the window and jerked it open, peering down like she might see a thief politely waving goodbye. She slammed it shut again, furious. "This neighborhood is going to hell," she snapped. "And it's because of you. Trouble follows you. It always has." I kept my eyes lowered, breathing shallow like I was terrified. Inside my jacket, the microSD card pressed against my skin like a secret heartbeat. Cordelia's gaze flicked around the room again, scanning for what might be missing. Her eyes snagged briefly on the suitcase's dusty mark near the closet gap. My stomach clenched, so hard I thought I might be sick. But then she huffed, dismissing it. "What would a thief want with your old junk?" she muttered, already moving on to her own paranoia. "Useless." I let out a shaky breath, careful not to make it obvious. Cordelia stomped past me into the hallway, still ranting about security cameras and how the world was cursed and how I was the curse. She didn't notice my hand sliding to my jacket pocket, fingers pressing lightly against the microSD to reassure myself it was real. That night, I didn't wait for permission. I didn't wait for the right time. I told Cordelia my voice was shaking too badly, that I couldn't stay in the house after a break-in, that I needed to sleep somewhere else for a night to calm down. Cordelia barely listened. She was too busy barking into her phone, complaining to neighbors, blaming the city, blaming the weather, blaming anyone who wasn't herself. "Go," she snapped. "Just don't make it my problem." I walked out with my heart still slamming against my ribs, keeping my face down until the gate shut behind me. Only then did I let myself breathe. I didn't run. Running draws attention. I walked to the corner like a normal person leaving a normal house. Then I turned the corner and moved faster, rain-slick pavement under my shoes, the city lights smearing in my vision. I got to the safe spot Totem had arranged, a small, plain apartment that felt like a secret nobody knew existed. The moment the door shut behind me, my knees almost gave out. Totem was there, waiting, phone in hand, eyes fierce. "Briar," she whispered, rushing forward. "Are you okay?" I nodded shakily and pulled the microSD from my jacket pocket like it was something sacred. "I got it," I breathed. "This was in the wedding photo." Totem's eyes widened, and for a split second she looked like the younger version of herself, the one who still got surprised by the world. "Of course Nolan would do that," she murmured, almost reverent. Then her expression hardened again. "Get it in the laptop, now." She had a small computer already set up on the table, the room lit by a single lamp that made everything feel clandestine. The air was quiet, thick with the kind of tension that doesn't let you blink. My hands were still shaking as Totem inserted the microSD into the reader. The laptop screen blinked, then loaded. One folder appeared. The name on it made my breath stop. The Truth. Totem didn't speak. Neither did I. The folder opened with a click that sounded too loud in the silence. Inside were video files, a lot of them, labeled in simple order like someone organizing time, 1, 2, 3, each with a date stamped. And the first date. It was only days before Nolan disappeared. My throat tightened until it hurt. Totem's finger hovered over the mousepad. The cursor floated over the first file like it was afraid to touch it. I swallowed hard, my pulse roaring in my ears. Because I knew, deep down, that once we clicked play, there would be no going back to the version of my life where Nolan's disappearance was an accident. Totem glanced at me, eyes sharp and steady. "Ready?" she asked softly. I didn't answer with words. I just nodded and watched her finger tighten, the cursor still hovering, right before the truth finally moved. The folder on the microSD was named The Truth, like Nolan had stamped it there for the day my heart finally stopped pretending. Totem didn't speak. She just clicked the first file. The screen filled with silent footage from a high corner of Nolan's study. No sound, no music, just the kind of quiet that makes your nerves scream louder. I recognized everything instantly. The desk, the bookshelf, the plant in the corner I used to water like a ritual. For a second, it felt like the past was reaching through the screen to grab me by the throat. Nolan sat at the desk, shoulders tight, eyes hollow. He looked cornered, like someone had been turning screws inside his life for a long time. Across from him sat a man I'd never seen. Older, expensive suit, calm face, the kind of calm that doesn't come from peace but from power. Even without audio, I could read the story in their bodies. The man leaned forward and tapped the desk, slow and deliberate, like he was counting down. Nolan shook his head once. Then again. The man's hand slammed down and Nolan didn't flinch. That part terrified me most. He wasn't surprised by aggression anymore. The man stood abruptly and stormed out. Nolan stayed behind, staring at the desk, hands pressed to his forehead. He looked like someone trying to keep himself from falling apart. Totem clicked the next video, then the next. Different days, different strangers. A sharp-looking woman with a tight smile tossed a folder like an insult and left when Nolan pushed it back. A tattooed man leaned too close, gesturing like a threat. Another stranger sat across from Nolan and spoke with hands that moved like knives. Nolan kept refusing. And the more he refused, the more exhausted he looked, like stubbornness was the only thing holding him upright. My stomach tightened. This wasn't about one problem, I whispered. This was a siege. Totem didn't answer. She clicked the last file. The timestamp read, 1 day before he vanished. Nolan looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Not emotional, not broken, just drained, like he'd already lived through the consequences in his head. And sitting across from him was Graham. My father-in-law didn't look like a grieving man in that video. He looked like a man negotiating. Graham slid a thick folder across the desk. Then, like a final shove, a plain ticket. Nolan stared at it as if it was poison. Graham's hands moved fast, pleading. Nolan's jaw clenched hard. Then Nolan stood so sharply his chair flipped backward. Even without sound, I knew he was shouting. He pointed at the folder, slammed his palm on the desk, and shook his head like the betrayal physically hurt. He walked out. The study door slammed. Graham stayed behind, head in his hands, shoulders hunched, not in guilt but in calculation. Totem rewound, slow, frame by frame. Wait, look at the folder. A corner of paper lifted for half a second. We zoomed in until the image broke into pixels. But 2 lines were still readable. Land conveyance contract. Alpharetta. My breath caught so hard it hurt. Alpharetta, Nolan's eco-housing project. The one he said got cancelled. The one he mourned quietly like a dream that died, and I didn't know why. It hadn't been cancelled. It had been stolen. Totem rewound again. Under the desk, she said. I leaned in. A black USB drive was taped beneath Nolan's desk, hidden like a last heartbeat. It was easy to miss, the kind of detail you'd overlook if you blinked. But Nolan hadn't hidden it for strangers. He'd hidden it for someone desperate enough to look twice. That USB is still in the Hartwell house, I whispered. Totem's eyes hardened. Then we get it. I swallowed. Cordelia will never let me back in again. We're not asking Cordelia, Totem said quietly. We're making her panic. The way she said it made my skin prickle. Because whatever she was about to do wasn't going to be gentle. And somewhere deep down, I realized the scariest thing wasn't that Nolan had enemies. The scariest thing was that his enemies were already used to winning. If fear had a sound, it would have been the click of that USB sliding into my palm. That night, the air felt wrong, heavy, like the city knew something ugly was about to happen and decided to watch. Evan parked across the street from the Hartwell house with the engine running. Totem sat in the passenger seat, still, focused, like she'd turned her emotions into ice so she could function. I sat in the back, replaying one thought until it became a rhythm. In, out, breathe later. A van rolled into the street and killed its lights. 2 masked men climbed out, quick and sure, like they'd done this before. Then it started. Glass shattered at the front of the house. Cordelia screamed. Lights snapped on, shadows moved. The quiet neighborhood turned into a storm of panic. Evan's voice came through the earpiece. Now, Briar. My legs moved before my mind caught up. I slipped along the side of the property, staying low, rain soaking through my sleeves. The back of the house was darker and quieter, and that silence felt dangerous, like the calm center of something violent. The study window was where it always was. Inside, the air smelled like old wood and stale control. I didn't turn on a light. I didn't dare. I moved by memory, heart pounding loud enough I swore it had to echo. I dropped to my knees and reached under the desk. Tape. Plastic. The USB slid free. Relief hit me so hard my eyes burned. Then the study door clicked. Someone was opening it. My lungs stopped working. I flattened under the desk, holding the USB like it was my only chance at oxygen. The door opened. Hallway light spilled in, slicing the room into shadows. A man stepped inside. Not Graham. Not one of the masked raiders. A stranger in a tailored coat, silver at the temples, calm eyes that didn't belong in a robbery. I recognized him instantly. He was the man from the first video. Behind him came one of the masked men, moving with respect. "Boss," the masked man said. "She's showing us where the cash is." "Boss." Cold flooded my veins. This wasn't random crime. This was organized, controlled. The boss paced slowly, scanning the study as if the house belonged to him. "I don't care about her jewelry," he said. "Where's the evidence Nolan left?" Hearing Nolan's name in that mouth made my stomach twist. The masked man muttered, "Not found yet." The boss's voice sharpened. "Then search properly." Sirens wailed in the distance, closing in fast. The masked man swore, "Cops." The boss stiffened. "Fine, pull out." The masked man rushed out. The boss lingered. Then he bent slightly and looked under the desk. His eyes met, mine through the gap like a blade finding soft skin. For a half-second, he looked shocked. Then his expression changed. Recognition. Then cruelty. "You," he breathed, like my existence offended him. My body moved on instinct. I kicked the desk leg hard. The heavy table lurched forward, slamming into his shin. He staggered with a furious grunt. I shot out from under the desk and bolted for the window. "Stop," he roared. I didn't stop. I climbed out, hit the ground hard, pain detonating up my side, and ran like my life depended on it. Because it did. Evan was already pulling the car forward. I dove into the back seat, trembling, clutching the USB. "Totem," I gasped. "He saw me. He's not just connected, he's leading this." Back at the safe base, Evan plugged the USB into the laptop. 2 files appeared. 1 clear audio recording. 1 encrypted letter. The audio played, and my blood ran cold. Nolan's voice, Graham's voice, and a third voice that sounded like polished poison. "I'm Vaughn Blackridge," the man said calmly. "Hand over Alpharetta." Nolan refused. Vaughn's voice chilled. "Graham, you have 1 week to handle your son." The recording ended like a door slamming. Evan cracked the encryption. Lines appeared, one by one, like truth forcing itself into the room. Nolan's testament. His last words. And then the sentence that split the air open. "Trust no one, not even Totem." I turned toward her slowly. And suddenly, the room felt smaller than a cage. The warning sat between us like a loaded gun. Totem's face went pale, then red, then pale again like her body couldn't decide whether to faint or fight. "I didn't," she whispered. "I didn't betray him." I wanted to believe her. I also wanted to protect Milo, and those 2 instincts collided in my chest until it hurt. Evan forced air into the room. "We can't convict her with 1 sentence," he said. "Nolan wrote this under pressure. People misread signals when they're hunted." Totem's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the table. Then she whispered, almost like she hated herself for saying it. 2 weeks before he disappeared, I lost my phone." Evan's eyes narrowed. "Lost." "I was out," she admitted, swallowing. "A bar, friends, too much to drink, woke up and it was gone. I replaced my SIM card and moved on." Evan's voice turned sharp. "That phone didn't vanish. It was stolen, and not by strangers." Totem's breath hitched. "Cordelia and Graham," Evan continued. "They took it. They read everything. They learned Nolan suspected them. They learned he was collecting evidence. I felt the pieces snap into place with a sick certainty. "And Nolan," I said quietly, throat tightening, "thought you leaked it." Tatum's eyes filled instantly. She covered her mouth, shaking. "So he thought I was the reason he—" "No," I cut in. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You're not the reason, you're another target." That didn't erase the pain in her face, but it changed what it meant. We were back on the same side, not because things were suddenly safe, but because we didn't have time to fall apart. Then Tatum's phone rang. A clinic. Asheville, North Carolina. The nurse's voice was professional and calm. "Is this family of Cordelia Hartwell? She's been in a serious accident. We need someone to come immediately." My stomach dropped. "Asheville," Evan repeated, already suspicious. Tatum stood fast, torn and furious. "I have to go." "It's bait," I said softly. Her jaw clenched. "Maybe, but she's still my mother." She left anyway. The second the door shut, the room felt colder. I called her phone, straight to voicemail. Again. Nothing. Evan paced once, then turned to me. "Think, anything else Nolan ever gave you? Anything strange?" I blinked, searching memory through panic. "My birthday," I said suddenly. "A cactus. He gave me a cactus." Evan froze. "Where is it?" "On the windowsill," I said, confused. Evan moved to the plant like it might be a map. He inspected it close. Then he tugged at one spine near the base. It wasn't a spine. It was metal. Inside was a tiny GPS chip disguised perfectly, like Nolan had hidden hope inside something harmless. My breath caught. He planned this. Evan connected it to the laptop. A digital map appeared. A blinking dot lit up near Asheville. My skin went cold. Cordelia's accident, the clinic call, the location, it wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. "Tatum is walking into it," I whispered. Evan dialed her again. No answer. He swore under his breath, then called a number I didn't recognize. "Uncle Orson," Evan said, voice tight. "It's Evan. Nolan's location just pinged near Asheville. Tatum's in danger. We need you." A pause. Then a deep voice answered, calm and heavy. "Gather in 30 minutes. Bring everything." Evan looked at me. "We're going." And for the first time in years, fear wasn't the strongest thing in my body. Hope was. Sharp, stubborn hope. The mansion sat above the lake, like a secret that never expected to be found. We arrived in the dead of night. No streetlights, no neighbors close enough to hear anything. Just trees, water, and a building that felt like it belonged to a different world. Men in dark gear moved around Evan with quiet precision. Uncle Orson arrived last, calm as a verdict. No speeches, no dramatic "will save him." Just a plan spoken in short sentences. 2 teams, 1 distraction, 1 infiltration. I was told to stay back in the car, watching the drone feed. I lasted 2 minutes before I started shaking. And then the screen showed movement inside. A guard dropped. A door breached. The mansion swallowed them. Then an explosion hit the basement, and the whole building shuddered like something inside it had snapped. Smoke rolled into the hallway. My lungs stopped cooperating. I didn't think. I ran. Inside, chaos lived in every corner. Broken glass, overturned furniture, men down in the dark. The air smelled like gunpowder and mold, like fear had been stored there for years. I found the basement door half open and rushed down. The stairs were damp. The light was sickly yellow, shadows twisted on concrete walls. At the bottom, my world stopped. Tatum was tied to a pillar, gagged, eyes blazing. And on a rusted bed lay a man so thin it stole my breath. Beard, hollow cheeks, bruises. But his eyes, those eyes were Nolan's. Alive. A sob tore out of me before I could swallow it. Von Blackridge stood over him, pistol aimed like a casual decision. Cordelia and Graham stood nearby, pale and trembling, like they'd finally realized monsters don't protect their helpers forever. Vaughn smiled at me, hand over the evidence. Evan and the others burst in behind me, weapons raised, but nobody moved. Not with Nolan at gunpoint. Nolan's voice was weak but steady. "Briar, don't." Vaughn's smile sharpened. "1, 2. My hands shook. I pulled out the external hard drive Evan had given me earlier, the one meant for emergencies. I slid it across the floor. Vaughn's man grabbed it and plugged it into a laptop waiting on a crate. "Boss," the henchman said, "it's all here." Vaughn's face lit with victory. He aimed at me. Love is such an easy leash. I closed my eyes and saw Milo's face, small hands reaching for me. Then a shot cracked. I flinched, expecting pain. Instead, I heard Vaughn grunt. His pistol clattered to the floor. I opened my eyes. Uncle Orson stood at the top of the basement stairs, handgun smoking, expression like thunder inside a man. Behind him poured police officers, flooding the room with commands and handcuffs and certainty. "Vaughn Blackridge," Orson said calmly. "It's over." Vaughn stared like he'd just met the past. "Who are you?" Orson's mouth twitched faintly. "Someone who's been waiting a long time." Cordelia and Graham dropped to their knees, crying, babbling excuses. Cordelia screamed my name like I'd personally ruined the universe. Too late. Handcuffs clicked. I ran to Nolan, gripping his face like I needed proof he was real. His skin felt warm, alive. He whispered, barely audible. "I'm sorry." Tatum was freed, sobbing once she could breathe. Later, after everything settled, Orson told us the truth. Nolan's disappearance wasn't an accident. It was survival and strategy. He'd worked with Orson's network to trap Vaughn because Vaughn wasn't just a criminal. He was an empire. Nolan let himself be taken to gather final proof and bait Vaughn into exposing everything. "And the hard drive you gave him," Orson said. Evan exhaled. "Decoy." "The real evidence hit federal hands the moment you recovered it," Orson confirmed. Tonight was about timing. The trials moved fast. Vaughn fell hard. Cordelia and Graham followed. A year later, the air felt clean. Sunlight danced on the water near Asheville. Milo laughed in Nolan's arms, clinging like he never wanted to let go again. Nolan was still healing. Therapy, scars, quiet moments where his eyes went distant. But he was here. Tatum and Evan stood nearby, close in a way that looked like two people who'd been through fire and decided to build something softer afterward. Nolan pulled me in and whispered into my hair, "I hate that you suffered." I leaned into him. "I hate that you were alone." Milo tugged my hand, smiling. "Mommy, come play." So I did. Because the storm didn't end, because the world suddenly became fair. It ended because I learned something I never wanted to learn. Life will throw you into darkness and call it fate. And sometimes, the only way out is to create your own light with shaking hands. And keep walking anyway.